and I'm back, and today I'm going to be making a part 2 of my guide of Day of Dragons. So part 1 I will link in the description below, and I will also leave it as a recommended video on the end of this one, so you should probably watch that first, because this is kind of an extension of that. This is like after you learn the basics, it's like what else you need to know. So you should probably watch that first. And in that video I explain anything else that you might need, like also I made the introduction to Day of Dragons, which if you want you should probably watch that one before the beginner's guide. I will also leave that in the description if I remember. I was going to talk about kidnapping on PvE servers. So this is pretty much when somebody picks you up and like takes you away on like a place where there's no food or water, and then wait for you to die and then eat you. But that is actually not possible anymore. They patched it up. They made it so like only if you're in a group of somebody can carry you. I'll still talk about it a little bit, but I just gotta point out that this game is still beta. This game can change a lot since I'm making this guide, so always if you're watching my guide like in the future, or even right when I post it, maybe something will already change, like then you should probably check if something doesn't work. What I was saying that it does work, you should double check if something got changed at that point. Pretty much at one point in that same update where they removed kidnapping, pretty much, they made the nights very dark, very light actually. They made them lighter, but in the same day they made them darker again because night vision wasn't necessary. So see, like this game's gonna change, probably not a lot as much as it changed between alpha and beta, but it's still gonna change some, like in some things that are gonna be better, maybe even worse, depends how you like it. So even though only if you're in a group with somebody that somebody can carry you, sometimes groups can be very big and you don't know, can you trust everybody? So I'll still talk about how to free yourself from that, because that's kind of necessary if somebody in a group decides to be mean to you in, for example, a PvE server. In a PvP server you can just get killed, but in a PvE server, which you should be safe from other players, that was a big problem. So pretty much the idea is somebody takes a hatchling and drops them in a place where there's no food or water, and then they just wait for them to starve to death or die out of thirst, and then they can eat them for food, pretty much. And I have witnessed that, and I have also, somebody tried to kidnap me before, so that was a very big problem actually. It's really not fair, because when somebody goes on a PvE server, they expect to be safe from other people, especially if you're a beginner, if you're watching this guide, or if you're just watching it for some tips, which obviously I have. But like, if somebody comes on a PvE server, you don't want to be harassed by other players, you don't want somebody to be able to attack you, so that's why this was very annoying. So, to free yourself, you need to press the left mouse button very quickly when they actually grab you. That helps you to, after a few seconds, you're gonna struggle out of their mouth and you're gonna be able to escape if they don't catch you again. But you can do that just at all times. A way to also prevent this is just sleeping inside of another dragon's body, or just standing in there. Because in this game, even though it's very realistic, you can't bump into other players. For example, if you now have your dad and mom there, you can just like go inside them and then you're gonna pretty much be safe. So if you're, for example, kidnapped by a shadow scale on a PvE server, and you don't struggle out immediately and they start flying and you're very high in the air, you can actually still struggle out and you cannot die out of fall damage. Your health will be very low, but on a PvE server that doesn't really matter. So even if you're high in the air, don't let them take you wherever. You just gotta struggle out, and even if you take a lot of damage, you're not gonna be dead. So in this video here you can see a dragon that tried to kill themselves by fall damage. They tried to dive down and then die. So let's just grab some popcorn and wait for them to figure out it's not possible. I guess it's some kind of suicidal dragon, what do I know, but I thought that was a funny sight. So, if you're playing with a shadow scale and you get kidnapped by another shadow scale and they start flying around, you don't free yourself immediately, as I said. You can actually release yourself when you're high in the air and try to fly. You can press F and you're gonna glide. Even if you can't fly currently because you're hatchling, you can still glide. That means you don't get increased speed or you can't gain altitude, but you can still find an appropriate place to land without hurting yourself. So now we're gonna talk about becoming a juvenile and what does that mean and how that whole thing goes. Because juvenile is one step, first you're a hatchling, then you become a juvenile. So it will take quite a while to become an actual adult. For shadow scales it takes around 3 hours, and for acid spitters 2 hours. But you still need to go through the first step of becoming juvenile. So that works in a way that for the shadow scales, it's around 1 hour, and for acid spitters, it's around 45 minutes. So this is the most critical phase, and once you reach it, you have a way higher chance of actually becoming an adult. So I mentioned this in my first guide, but juveniles they cannot drink from puddles. So you have to be careful if you are drinking from a puddle, and you need to watch that orange bar that tells you on which level you are before the next stage. And if you become a juvenile, and then you're gonna have to find a deeper place to drink from. So just saying, even though I mentioned it before, but just saying so you don't die out of thirst. So for example, if you see that you're gonna become a juvenile soon and you have a puddle near you, drink as much as you can. It doesn't matter if it's only on 10%, it's fine. No, you should still drink just in case in this game you never know when is the next time you're gonna be able to drink or eat. So you always should try to keep it as your hunger and thirst as low as possible. If possible, keep them non-existent. When you become a juvenile, you're pretty much gonna have to find an adult lake or river to be able to drink from that. So pretty much if you're near one of the AI spawns, you should definitely grab one bug if you can and carry it around with you, because some of the lakes don't actually have food around them. So now you're gonna have to find a new home pretty much, because you're in the next stage. And where should you go? I mentioned that it's way easier to just look at maps that were created by other people than actually try to find it yourself in the game. I will leave in the description the map I was using. That map contains pretty much everything. As much as I've noticed, I don't think there's anything missing, so it should help you. So if you're playing on a PvP server, you should probably avoid rivers. Rivers are quite dangerous because there's a lot of food around them, yes, and they're also a water source. But a lot of people gather around them, especially on PvE servers. It should be fine. Nothing really should be bad about that. You can go on rivers if you're on a PvE server, but if you're on a PvP server, it's quite dangerous because people, and even if somebody like in the chat tells you like, oh, want me to help you and stuff, there is a chance they're just gonna fool you and feed you to their hatchlings. It can happen. So when I was preparing for this video, I tried many times to become an adult on a PvP server. So this didn't always go well. Even though now I have quite an experience with this game, it still doesn't always go well. So don't be disappointed if you made I made so many stupid mistakes, or I was just very impatient. So you have to be patient, you have to watch out for pretty much everything, especially when you're on a PvP server. Anything and anybody can harm you. So hopefully your journey to an adult lake or river will be successful, but that's only the first step. So the juvenile period lasts much longer than the hatchling period, and it's also much harder to hide because you're bigger. But nevertheless, any things that I said, like any hacks that I said from my previous video or right here, can still be applied to juvenile. It's not only for hatchlings. So pretty much if you have nothing to do, again, just sleep, wait for the 60 seconds to pass, and then you can just safe log out, as I mentioned previously, how that works. So the method of staying invisible forever, pretty much in the crouching position, still does work, but because you're bigger, there's a higher chance that somebody will notice you. So pretty much if you're playing with an acid spitter, you're very fast now, and that means you're gonna be able to avoid adult shadow scales. And yes, they are very fast when they're flying, but it takes them a long time to get up in the air and get down. And it's also for them very hard to hit a moving target, especially when you're moving as fast as the acid spitter can move, especially like in trees and stuff, and it's just very complicated. So you're pretty much safe as long as you manage to, run very fast. So now we're gonna talk about flying. So if you watched my Day of Dragons introduction to Day of Dragons video, which you probably should, I explain how flying is way different here than in most dragon games. I mean, it's definitely way different. It's more like a flight simulator than an actual like dragon game that you would usually see, like for example, Dragons of the Edge or School of Dragons. It's very hard. The point is you have to pretty much think of physics of flying. You have to think about speed and momentum and such things. So before you actually begin flying, you have to make sure that you have a clear path to gain altitude. So it is very dangerous to try to get up in the air or get down, for example, in the middle of a forest, especially a redwood forest, because trees there are very high, and you have a very chance of bumping into a tree and falling down. Yes, you cannot you can't die out of fall damage, but you can take very, like, a lot of damage, and if you're on a PvP server and somebody sees you fall down from a tree, they might as well just finish you and eat you. So here in this clip you can see what happens when you try to fly off in a forest and fail. When you fall down, you're gonna have a very little health and somebody can easily finish you off, and it's just not something you should do. You should definitely watch out and just make sure that you have a clear path, because otherwise you're gonna be in problems. The problem is healing is a very slow process, so when you're trying to heal, it's gonna take a while. So PvE servers, like, fine, I guess you can try if you really want to fly, but you probably shouldn't either, but especially on PvP servers. Again, if somebody sees you fall down, they're just gonna come and finish you. So I already explained that you can actually fly as a juvenile, but the problem is you have to either jump off a cliff or run down some hill to gain enough speed. So even when you're an adult, you can't just fly by pressing one button like in School of Dragons and you're just gonna be flying. No, this works very differently here. It doesn't matter if you are a juvenile or an adult, you still take the same way of actually starting to fly, except with juvenile you need extra things, as I said already. First you need to start running by pressing Shift plus the W key. Be sure to still hold those two keys when you're going to be pressing the rest of the keys that I'm going to mention now. So when you're at full speed, you need to press the space bar to jump. And when you're jumping, wait until your dragon is at the highest position it can be, and then press F. Immediately after that, you have to release the W key, and instead you have to press the S key. But make sure when you're pressing the S key, you're still holding Shift. So the keys for this game are actually in the opposite direction, the W and the S key. Which that might be strange if you've never played a flight simulator. It was very strange for me as well. But you can actually go into settings and invert that the other way around to be easier. This will also make takeoff easier if you invert it, because then you just need to continue to hold Shift plus W combination the whole time. You don't need to change anything. So when you're in the air, you shouldn't try to gain too much altitude too fast. That'll pretty much result in you losing control of your dragon. That'll pretty much result in your dragon moving to the side. You're not gonna press anything. Your dragon is just gonna start moving to the side because physics or something, I don't know. And you could see that in the example, the bad example I showed when I was trying to get up in the forest. So here's a good example of taking off from the same spot, because sometimes you just need to take off no matter the danger. For example, if somebody's chasing you or something, you really don't have much of a choice then. So this time I didn't go up so quickly, so I managed to remain in the control of my dragon and didn't bump into a tree. Very important is that when you're in the air, don't make sharp and hard moves. It's very realistic, so you should just take it slow, take it easy. This is kind of why I kind of do prefer acid spitters, because they're way simpler. You don't need to know any of this. You just run around like a maniac. It's very easy. So for example, if you turn left by holding the A button for a few seconds, your dragon will turn really sharply. But it will also start to lose altitude, just like a real plane or a bird. That's because tilted wings give less lift than horizontal wings. So if you're very low above the ground, or if you're very close to trees, in that case, if you do something like that, you might hit the ground or hit a tree and lose all of your health. Obviously not all, but a lot. So also be very careful when you're diving, which this was so sad to me because, for example, in School of Dragons, I just love diving with dragons. It's so much fun. But here, if you want to dive, you're gonna get a lot of momentum. You're gonna get a lot of speed, and you might not have enough time to level your dragon before you hit something. So when you're flying, just casually flying, you're gonna have to press the shift button sometimes so you wouldn't lose too much speed. So when you do lose too much speed, if you don't do this, your dragon is gonna try to hover in one place, but it can't do that. That will make you lose speed and altitude very fast. So when you're in that position, you can get back to flying again by pressing W and shift. Or S if you have inverted controls. But when you do that, that will lower your altitude, and again, you're gonna risk hitting the ground. So flying at night is very, very hard. So even though night vision is pretty necessary for anything you're doing in the night, flying is not one of those things. I explained that in my last video, the first part of the introduction to Day of Dragons. Flying, you shouldn't do with night vision. At least when you're high in the air. If you're very close to trees and stuff, okay, but night vision has a very limited range of how far you can see, so it's not good to use when you're very high in the air. So yeah, you should really avoid flying in the night, except if you're a very experienced player and know where you're going, know how to orient yourself and all of that, or if you really need to, for example, you're running away from somebody, then yeah, you gotta do that. So landing is also very challenging, but there is a way to land safely and without hurting yourself. So when you're lower to the ground, press and hold the spacebar until you stop completely, and you will start descending. So when you're almost at the ground, press the F key to land. But even if you don't press the F key, you're still gonna land without taking damage. So if you need to land quickly, you'll have to practice slowing down with a spacebar and moving your dragon towards the ground with the W key or S if you have inverted controls. So now we're gonna talk about navigation, probably the most important thing when flying or just if you're going anywhere. So I already talked about coordinates when I was explaining the character panel in my first guide, so you can see that there. But it's very challenging to coordinate yourself when you're a beginner and you need to look at maps and stuff. So your position is represented with 2 numbers, and each number has an additional letter that marks the cardinal direction. So for example, if your first number has N on it, that means you're in the northern part of the map. If you travel north, that number will increase, and if you travel south, it will decrease. So if your first number has S on it, that means you're in the southern part of the map, which means if you travel north, it will decrease, while traveling south, it will make it increase. So similarly, if your second number is W, then you're in the western part of the map, and if you travel in that way, it will increase, and if you travel east, it will decrease. If your second number is E, that means you're in the eastern part of the map, and traveling east will increase it and west will decrease it. So in the beginning, you should maybe try to go directly in just one direction. For example, north or south, and then that number will be completely correct. And then when you come to the correct part, you just need to level the other number as well. In that case, you just need to turn west or east depending where you want to go. That will make your trip much longer, but it will make it much easier to navigate that way. So when you're flying, just be careful that this map has an edge. This map isn't going on forever. So somewhere around 800 in all directions. So if you bump into the edge, you will fall and lose most of your health. So now for the conclusion, as I said, I'm going to be leaving that map in the description. That map pretty much has all food sources, water sources, those special mushrooms. I'll talk about that in a video later when I'm going to be explaining the elder dragons. I'm going to make that video eventually. And it also shows, for example, mountain peaks, lakes, or caves and stuff like that, so it's way easier to orient. So I didn't really talk about mating or nesting, which I'll probably make a video about it later. It didn't feel like something for a beginner's guide. I feel like that's something that you can do later when you actually learn how to become an adult and protect yourself, and then you can actually protect others. But you can pretty much ignore a lot of the advice that I gave from this video and last video for like when you're a very little child, for when you're just a hatchling. If you get an egg invite from somebody, because then your parents will nest near a water source, so you'll have water, and they'll bring you food until you grow up. So it's way simpler, but that usually doesn't happen the first time. The first time, at least, you're gonna have to just, start yourself. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I really hope this was helpful. I'll definitely be making more Day of Dragons videos. I really like this game. I think it's a lot of fun. Obviously, I'll still be making a lot of School of Dragons stuff, probably more, because that game is still a bigger game and I really play it more. But anyways, I hope this was helpful, and bye.